Western Canada is famous for the towering mountain peaks of the majestic Canadian Rockies and the vast wilderness surrounding them. Great sentinels of granite touch the sky. Ancient glaciers reflect an icy green glow in afternoon sunlight, and waterfalls tumble down steep alpine ridges, breaking into foam on the rocks below. Herds of elk graze on meadow grass. Bears forage for food alongside the forest. Mountain goats peer from a rock ledge, and eagles soar high overhead. The timeless wonder of the Canadian Rockies casts a spell on those who venture into Canada's west. This wild and beautiful land was once considered inaccessible by any means. Impassable mountains, treacherous rivers, and heavy snowfalls formed a barrier to further passage westward by land. Then, in the late 1800s, Canada decided to build a coast-to-coast railway. It took thousands of workers, millions of dollars, and 5 years to build the first rail line through the Rockies to the Pacific Ocean. In 1885, the last spike was driven into Canada's first transcontinental railway, making it possible to travel through the mountains to the shores of the Pacific Ocean. First-class trains carried tourists into areas previously accessible only to wild animals, native peoples, and a handful of intrepid explorers. Prestigious resorts and mountain lodges emerged, and new national parks achieved worldwide acclaim. The Canadian Rockies were the place to be, and the railway was the best way to get there. Today, the grand touring experience of this great rail journey lives on with Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tours. Anticipation mounts as travelers arrive at the train station in the early morning hours. They are immediately greeted by a bustling atmosphere and smiling attendants who are dedicated to maintaining traditional service standards expected on one of the great train journeys. Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tours, the most spectacular train trip in the world. This 2-day, all-daylight train journey travels in modern comfort through the most dramatic scenery in Western Canada. Passengers step on board to begin their journey of a lifetime. Many have traveled from far points of the world to experience the Canadian Rockies by rail.
We'd heard that the train was meant to be fantastic, so we thought, quite a few people we spoke to back in England sort of said, yeah, it was worth doing it. We thought we'd take the train.
I've heard about it at school many years ago, and on TV we've seen films about Canada, also from relatives who've visited here. They think it's beautiful, yes.
The Rocky Mountaineer travels westbound, starting out in Calgary, Banff, or Jasper, Alberta, or eastbound from Vancouver, British Columbia. Whichever direction they choose, travelers pass through towering mountains, semi-arid desert, lush temperate rainforest, and coastal waters, all in the space of 2 days. They cross 5 different mountain ranges and 3 distinctly different climates along the way. We'll follow the route of the early explorers and railway visionaries as they forge their way westward to the Pacific Ocean. Dawn breaks in the Rocky Mountains as the train departs from Calgary, Alberta. Nestled alongside the Bow River and within sight of the mountains, present-day Calgary is a booming oil town, surrounded by cattle ranches and known for the world-famous Calgary Stampede. By mid-morning, the Rocky Mountaineer arrives in the Rockies resort of Banff. popular with tourists since the first days of passenger train travel. Banff is located in the middle of Banff National Park, a 260 square mile forest and wildlife reserve. Banff offers an abundance of outdoor activities such as golfing, hiking, boating, and fishing. For those who want to take life a little easier, the region's thermal hot springs or the Banff Springs Spa are a great way to relax. It also has a selection of fine restaurants and great shopping for everything from jewelry to fine arts or fishing gear. A short drive from Banff is the famous Icefields Parkway. Reputed to be one of the most scenic drives in the world, it cuts through the center of the Rocky Mountains between Banff and Jasper. Water melting from the great mountaintop glaciers form many beautiful lakes and rivers along the way. Ancient canyons cut deep by swift-flowing rivers, rapids dancing over rocks, then flowing into placid streams where fish collect in quiet pools. Time moves at a leisurely pace on this rail tour, with plenty of opportunities to take photos or relax and enjoy the scenery. As the train pulls out of the Banff station, the mountains stand as timeless sentinels, each one as impressive as the next, yet each with its own distinct character. We're in the heart of the Rockies now, where sweeping mountain vistas fill the horizon on all sides. The waters of the lakes and rivers along the way are painted in the most vivid shades of green, blue, and turquoise. This picture-perfect lake was named Lake Louise in honor of Queen Victoria's daughter.
So it's nice to actually see the wildlife and to see the mountains. We don't get mountains like these back home. You can only really appreciate them from the ground.
Living postcards, live, it's just beautiful, and we've seen the pictures before, but to experience it firsthand is just great.
The scenery is wonderful. I think we'd certainly recommend it to our friends because they like this kind of travel. They like to see the wild, they like to see it in comfort though.
At just over 1 mile above sea level, the Rocky Mountaineer crosses the Continental Divide, separating the Atlantic and Pacific watersheds. From this point westward, all water flows into the Pacific Ocean. While train travel through the Rockies is safe and popular now, conquering the region was not without its perils. In earlier railroading days, the area near Field, British Columbia, once known as the Big Hill, was the most dangerous stretch of track on the Canadian Pacific Line. In 1907, the spiral tunnels were built, using Swiss engineering to build the tracks in a figure eight through the center of two mountains. This engineering miracle lessened the grade from 4.5% to 2.2%, so trains could safely climb or descend the steep incline. A dispute between a geologist and his pack horse gave this river its name. In 1858, James Hector was surveying this canyon when he was kicked in the chest by his horse. Hector recovered and continued his expedition along what was later named the Kicking Horse River. During the winter months, Rogers Pass records the heaviest snowfalls in Canada. In order to make this area passable throughout the year, many snow sheds and tunnels have been constructed and are now constantly monitored and maintained. It's impossible not to be awed by mountains rising beyond the clouds and stretching across the horizon, some covered with 2-million-year-old glaciers, as the train passes through Banff, Yoho, and Glacier National Parks.
The rugged grandeur, I suppose, the bare rocks. We're familiar from home with high mountains like this, but not on the scale and not quite so rugged.
It is during this part of the journey that passengers are most likely to see the wildlife that Canada is famous for. Elk, moose, bighorn sheep, bear, and goats. Passengers often see some of the 50 different mammals and over 200 species of birds that make this region their home. One of the breathtaking highlights of the journey is Stony Creek Bridge. This steel-arched bridge rises 325 feet over a mountain crevice and above a creek bed far below. Its design and beauty made it one of the world's most important bridges in its day. After the Rockies, we passed through 4 other mountain ranges: the Purcells, the Selkirks, the Caribous, and the Monachees. In winter, heavy snows tumble down the steep mountainsides into the valleys below. Due to the jagged and angular nature of the terrain, this section of the rail line is characterized by many snow sheds, bridges, and tunnels that burrow through the mountains.
The views, the scenery, and I like looking at the water because we both like kayaking.
We saw some bald eagles earlier flying overhead, deer along the side.
The town of Revelstoke is nestled in the Monashee Mountains alongside the Columbia River. Revelstoke has always been an important hub for the railway in British Columbia. Recently, it has also become a haven for outdoor enthusiasts. The Columbia River is one of the most important waterways in Western Canada and the northwestern United States. Craigellachie is the site of the last spike, driven on November 7, 1885, to link the rail line from coast to coast. The Rocky Mountaineer travels along the shoreline of the Shuswap Lake. With over 1,000 kilometers of shoreline, the Shuswap offers a refuge for water sport enthusiasts and has been aptly named the houseboat capital of Canada. Once past the Shuswap Lake, the lush land becomes increasingly arid as the train travels into the Thompson River Valley before arriving in Kamloops in the early evening. Travelers can also begin their westbound journey in Jasper, the jewel of the Canadian Rockies. This charming mountain village is in the middle of Jasper National Park, one of the largest natural wildlife reserves in Canada. The elk are so numerous, they can often be seen wandering along the streets in the downtown area. Traveling southwest from Jasper to Kamloops, Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tour passengers experience some extraordinary mountain scenery. We pass a river, lake, and mountain that bear the name Yellowhead, after an Iroquois native scout with a blonde streak in his hair, whose nickname was Tête Jaune in French, or Yellowhead in English. At nearly 13,000 feet, Mount Robson is the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies. It was called the Mountain of the Spiral Road by the semi-nomadic Stoney Indian tribe, who camped in its shadow every summer. The enormous glaciers covering its slopes are the water source for 2 lakes below it. The exquisite alpine scenery continues from the Rockies to the Premier and Monashee ranges, with an abundance of glaciers, lakes, and waterfalls along the way. Pyramid Falls cascades down 300 feet to land within a few feet of the train tracks. As the day progresses, the train passes from mountain country into the rolling plateaus of the North Thompson River. Whichever departure point is chosen, whether traveling eastbound or westbound, everyone arrives in Kamloops, British Columbia at the end of day 1 and is transferred by bus to their hotel. Welcome to High Country. The Kamloops area is home to some of Canada's largest cattle ranches and a haven for lovers of the great outdoors. It is also in the heart of British Columbia's semi-arid desert, which is the northern tip of a dry belt that stretches all the way from the southern beaches of the North American continent. Before turning in for a comfortable night's rest, passengers may choose to explore the town, stroll along the boardwalk, or sample the pleasures of a country barbecue and local theater. Early morning, day 2. The Rocky Mountaineer departs from Kamloops for another day of leisurely sightseeing. Today, the train will travel from arid central British Columbia to the coastal city of Vancouver, passing through canyons and tumbleweed-covered hills along the way. Due to the region's drier climate, this part of British Columbia is almost always sunny, with a dramatic sweep of clouds across the sky. The lakes and rivers of this high country area provide both sports and recreation. This is the point where the clear water of the North and South Thompson rivers flow into the muddy Fraser River on its way to the Pacific Ocean. It is also an ideal location for whitewater rafters and more adventurous kayakers. Imagine the size of the bird that built this nest. The osprey, also known as the fish eagle, can often be seen soaring high above the river in search of its favorite prey.
It's been great. I mean, we saw the osprey yesterday along the river and around the lakes, and that's pretty something because although we have them back home in Scotland, not many people see them.
The deep, narrow gorges of the Fraser Canyon form a dramatic backdrop for the Rocky Mountaineer as it winds its way westward. Names such as the Jaws of Death Gorge serve to illustrate the danger to those who would try to tame the waters below. The only steamboat to successfully navigate upstream along this part of the Fraser River was the Scuzzy. On a September day in 1882, as onlookers wagered odds of 100 to 1 against its success, the Scuzzy valiantly struggled upstream. After 10 days, the ingenious CPR boss drove ring bolts into the canyon walls, attached huge ropes through them, and instructed hundreds of railway workers to pull the Scuzzy upstream through the rapids. At Hell's Gate, the Fraser River reaches its narrowest point, rushing through the gorge at more than 200 million gallons per minute. Although only one boat has ever succeeded in traveling upstream, millions of BC salmon swim past this point every year to spawn in the lakes and streams of the high country. The Fraser River, often raging into rapids, now becomes placid as the Rocky Mountaineer enters into the more pastoral and verdant Fraser River Valley. It is here that much of British Columbia's dairy products, fruits, and vegetables are produced. Despite its present-day tranquility, this area played a major role during the gold rush of the 1880s. An hour out of Vancouver, we come to a peaceful spot with a rowdy past. In 1904, the infamous outlaw Billy Miner committed the first train robbery in Canada. He got away with over $50,000 in gold dust, currency, and bonds, only to be foiled at a similar attempt 2 years later. It is late afternoon of our second day as the Rocky Mountaineer pulls into the train station in Vancouver. Many travelers will continue to explore the Pacific coastal area. Vancouver is Canada's third largest city and an important seaport on the Pacific Rim. It is also one of the most beautiful cities in the world, with mountains and ocean within view from almost any vantage point. Full of parks and gardens and surrounded by spacious beaches, it is a city with an abundance of nature in its midst. Vancouver also offers the cosmopolitan pleasures of shopping, fine dining, and theater. Outdoor enthusiasts enjoy the incredible variety of activities available in and around Vancouver. Boating, windsurfing, fishing, and hiking are all within minutes from the downtown core. Vancouver's favorable climate and relaxed lifestyle attracts many visitors to its shores each year. For those who wish to explore a little further afield, there are several options within a few hours of Vancouver. Whistler is an alpine resort community just north along the scenic Sea to Sky Highway. It offers world-class golfing, tennis, hiking trails, fishing or recreational lakes, and in the winter, some of North America's most celebrated skiing. Victoria, British Columbia's capital city, is just a short ferry ride from Vancouver. As its name suggests, it is quite Victorian, with hanging flower pots, carriage rides, high tea, and turn-of-the-century Parliament buildings. The Butchart Gardens and the Royal Victoria Museum are among the many popular attractions. A few hours south, Seattle, Washington is part of the thriving Pacific Northwest in the United States. Whether shopping, sightseeing, gallery hopping, or dining, visitors to Seattle will find a complete variety of entertainment pleasure. Relive the golden age of passenger rail travel with all the convenience of modern times. Scenery, service, and comfort.
The scenery is very different on each day. Haven't been disappointed one bit. It's been really great.
The Canadian Rockies are monuments to beauty, a sanctuary for nature's unbridled splendor, a testament to the wilderness of Western Canada. The best way to experience the romance of the Canadian Rockies has always been by rail. The timeless wonder of Western Canada continues to cast a spell that lasts beyond the journey. Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tours captures the romance and wonder of this special place in the time-honored tradition of the great rail journeys of the world. Come, see for yourself why so many have described Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tours as the most spectacular train trip in the world.